Hello, everybody. I'm here with Marvin Daniels, Tim Grimes. We're going to give you some true relationship manifestation advice today. What it takes to actually manifest a romantic partner, a so-called SP into your life long term, because it's nothing like the usual uh, sugar, stress-free advice we hear on most YouTube channels. I was actually looking at some creators titles the other day, some big creators in the SP space, and God, I just got to tell you, what dog shit, Marv. What dog shit. So yeah, Marv, happy July. I'm just curious, any insights from what you've been seeing in the space recently before we kind of dive into the topic of today's discussion?
Well, I would say I don't know if I've seen any new insights because I don't really watch other people's videos in regards to this topic. But I mean, there is stuff that I've heard or whatever from working with people. So I guess that's the difference that I've seen in people wanting to get the help versus doing the mainstream stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I know we're going to talk about today. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I like I said, I went on yesterday looking at some of the big coaches in the space, not just SP coaches, but just manifestation coaches. Um, it's just, honestly, I think it's worse than ever. And I think that the backlash is getting stronger, which is a good thing, where people are like, this is completely unacceptable. Like, you guys are literally selling us dog shit. You're just over promising. There's no accountability.
oh, you seen
Uh,
that?
I mean, I don't know. I've heard it just talking to clients, and just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I feel like people are more aware of that a little bit. But that, again, that might just be confirmation bias from me, from who I talk to, because obviously that's the kind of people that we speak to. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name names, I don't think, in this video, but like a lot of the big manifestation creators on YouTube, like, again, just their titling, um, it's just insane. Like, even just look at these titles. You guys know who I'm talking about. Just look at the big coaches. It's so fucking bad. It's just, I don't know. Like, it's one thing to, make like a big claim in a video title or whatever, and it's just a video title. I mean, who cares? But then, like, to follow it up with this selling, like, you're not going to have to do anything. It's just going to happen. The person's just going to show up. Just, stay in the state. Just align your frequency. It's just these laws in action. Guys, this is fucking manipulation. None of that shit's true. None of this shit is true. It's all garbage. And if you don't understand that, don't watch this video. Because like Marv said, there are two types of people in this space. There are those who really genuinely want to get help and change themselves. And then there's everybody else. And everybody else makes up at least 90% of the people watching these SP videos. And that is just like, you're just looking for another dopamine hit. And shit, you expect things to get better instead of worse, but things are going to get a hell of a lot worse before they get better usually. And that is the actual that's the actual law in action, guys. Y'all think that you have your imagination under control, and your imagination is controlling you. That's how this stuff actually works. We have to stop chasing dopamine. So what Marv and I have been noticing recently is, for those of you who are ready, and by the way, if you are ready, link is in the description. You can schedule a free consultation with us if you're genuinely ready. For the people who are ready, whether they get coaching, go to therapy, or just get really serious with themselves, the latter is a much harder option. It's much harder to do this by yourself than without help. But if you get serious, there's going to be a moment where basically you get kicked in the ass. Again, if you're working with a therapist or a coach or an energy healer, they will kick you in the ass. They will say, listen, are you serious about this? Because this is what you're doing. this is the passive behavior you're doing that is fucking you up. They will not use those words unless you're working with Marvin and I probably. And even us, we don't use those words. We're very genteel. But the energy, basically the energy, the gist is like, listen, you are fucking yourself up. That is why you are having these relationship dynamic problems. That's the kick in the ass. Okay. And if you're serious, you'll be able to hear that and listen. And then because you're listening to yourself more, you will be able to modify that behavior. And you will change your relationship with yourself. And in turn, naturally, through the law of attraction, start to change your relationship with other people. That's how it works. But what also happens is some people think they're ready. They get that kick in the ass and they go into hiding. They revert back into their old ways because they can't handle it yet. And what Marv and I see with people we speak to, on an initial consultation, is we usually will give them a small kick in the ass in the consultation. And most people can handle that. And they either become our client or don't. But there's also people we see who at least have been brave enough to get on a call with professionals, that when you mention, oh yeah, it sounds like you're doing this and are going to want to modify it, or like it sounds like you're going to have to reach out to this person or mention how you feel in a way you haven't articulated before. When we tell them that, you can see it. You see it in the call. They're like, whoa. And Marv and I know we're never going to hear from that person again, unless it's like a year or two later, and they'll be like, you know what, you were right. I'm ready now. So yeah, that was kind of a ramble, Marv, but that's how I see it. I assume you see it somewhat similarly.
No, I see it totally different, Tim. I don't see it that way at all.
This is like a hot take thing. Two different, totally different opinions.
Nah, man. I mean, you're right, man. Totally right. It's the funny thing is I always tell people this. I say, if your first reaction to something is to get offended when you hear it, that is clearly an indication that you need to do some work. Because I know personally, I've trained myself via discipline. My latest video was discipline. I trained myself to not get offended, then not allow that to be my first reaction. Now, if that becomes your third or fourth reaction after you get past those barriers, then you actually might be getting offended. And I see like, oh, it's okay. That's acceptable. Like you have a legit reason to be offended at somebody for saying something. But if that's your overall reaction, and a lot of times people that don't agree with Tim and I's message, it's coming from that place of, no, I don't agree with you. You offended me. What do you mean I can't get my SP? Or what do you mean I have to reach out to my SP first? That offends me for whatever reason. And so I challenge you to think about that. If you find yourself getting offended at stuff people say, doesn't even have to be us, just anybody, that is a clear sign that you need to do the work. Because I can tell you right now, if somebody says something to me, I'm not going to get offended. I was at the gym the other day sitting on a piece of equipment, and this guy comes over, and this random guy, old guy, has a super long gray beard, bald headed, and he looks at me and he's like, ugh, how many more sets do you have? He has this deep voice. I don't know where he was from. He's like, how many more sets you have? And I was like, probably about 2 more. And then he just like gets super angry, like waves his hand at me like this and just storms off. And I guess he wanted to use the machine. And in my head, I'm thinking, dude, why didn't you just ask to work in with me? You could have easily just worked in with me while I was using the machine. And so, some people would get offended at that. It didn't offend me. I was just like, I don't know what this guy's day's been like, but hey, I hope your day gets better. But I say all that to say, watch what you're getting offended at, because Tim is spot on with a lot of these SP coaches. I mean, and a lot of these SP people don't want to hear that truth. That truth, it hits something inside of them, and they're like, no, I don't want to hear that. And then a year later, 6 months later, whatever the case is, they come back and they say, you were right. I mean, Tim, you remember we even had a guy that mentioned that to you personally and came back and actually, as a man, I might add, apologized and said, yo, I was wrong. I really didn't like what you said one time, but you were absolutely right. And so that's the accountability that Tim and I provide when we work with people one-on-one, because people in this community, they don't hold you accountable really. They don't hold you accountable. They might hold you accountable from a perspective of persist, 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 because that's what you constantly hear. But as far as doing the real deep work, as far as getting to the problem of why you can't persist, because a lot of you guys can't persist and you don't know why. And a lot of these coaches don't explain to you why you can't persist, or they don't explain to you why the affirmation isn't working, or they don't explain to you why visualization isn't working. Tim just said it. Your imagination is going to beat you every time, basically. And that's right out of the mouth of Kuwait. Because it is your imagination. Your imagination is controlling you instead of you controlling it. And it's the same thing with relationships. The relationship is controlling you instead of you controlling the relationship. The same thing with money. Most people, in my opinion, are a slave to money instead of you making money your slave. It's that's how you're supposed to look at it. Money as a tool, but money controls so much of us. We are slaves for money instead of us telling money what to do. No, money, $5, $10, $1,000, $1,000,000. You go out there, you multiply. You work for me, money. I don't work for you. And so it's just these little nuanced mind shifts that people should work on developing. But that can only come when someone holds you accountable, because like Tim was saying, most people, there's too much going on throughout the day. Like I said, my recent video that I did on discipline, that word and deciding is pivotal, in my opinion. If you want to get whatever you want, if you want to become a better manifester, is deciding, number one. Once you make that decision, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to stick to this. And people think they're deciding and they're not deciding. And people think they're practicing law of assumption and they're not practicing law of assumption. And if you are practicing law of assumption, you're practicing from a place of indecision. That was the big theme of practicing. People think they're practicing law of assumption, but you're not really practicing it, because you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm doing this, living in the end scene of being with my person, and we're in a happy, loving relationship. But the underlying feeling of you doing that end scene, there's a ton of anxiety inside of you. You doing that end scene, there's a ton of, I have doubt that this is even going to work. There's a ton of all of that stuff going on underneath the surface. And when you're doing that, in my opinion, a lot of times underneath the surface, your results are probably going to be not what you want. It's going to be the exact opposite. The polarity is going to kick in and all that type of stuff that, the Joseph Murphys talk about, and all these great people, Quay and everybody else. So I think deciding, and then after you decide, I think having the discipline is just the two key things to get you started on this journey, because without that, you're pretty much done. And from what I've seen in this community, a lot of people, they just want to be pandered to. They want to be lied to. They want to be sold a dream. And Tim and I, we get it. And if we think that's realistic for you, we're going to tell you, yeah, we think there is a chance. And most of the people we talk to, we do tell them, yeah, this situation doesn't sound like it's over. This situation sounds like you and your person will be in contact again at the very least, or you guys might get back together. Like, we tell you. Now, if it's not that way, we will also tell you, like, oh, this is probably going to take a lot longer. I wouldn't be surprised. But there have been people that Tim and I have talked to where after we work with them, we think, Tim and I are like, yeah, I could see something happening in a few months or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're texting us or they email us and they're like, yeah, I got contact a week, 2 weeks later. Tim and I are like, whoa, we didn't expect it to happen that quick. So you just never know. This is why Tim and I always say this stuff is nuanced. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like you always say, Marv, I mean, that's what most people want initially when they get into this SP space. They really just want contact, because they feel like good contact, good communication again. And that usually should be the initial focus, as opposed to like, oh, I have this healthy, perfect, loving relationship now, when it was before you were, like you gave the example, before you were beating the shit out of each other. I mean, come on. But the larger point, you make so many good points. One thing that really struck me, that I think is so true, we're talking about making a decision and having discipline. One thing that we all can work on, and I'm still constantly working on this, is being more non-reactive. A huge problem in the SP space is people are way too reactive. they just react so quickly in regards to what, oh, my partner did this, I didn't get a text, and like Marv always likes to say, like, well, you don't have to react that way. And by that, we don't mean that harshly. Again, this is the irony, is like, we might sound like we're being harsh. The reality is, if you talk to us one-on-one, we're super gentle. We're not like dogmatic at all. Like, when we say you don't have to react like that, we just mean, it's like, oh, notice, like, when you don't get that text, how you feel. And notice that, like, okay, that there might be that feeling in the chest or stomach, that nervousness, but that you don't have to react and be like, oh, the story that comes from that is your decision, right? You start spinning the story. It's like what Emmett Fox says in regards to the 7-day mental diet. He says it's not like the coal. If you're by a fire and the coal gets on your shirt, if you wipe the coal off right away, you're not going to get a hole in the shirt. If you don't, you're going to get a hole. And so it's all about not dwelling and reacting and creating a narrative from what happens. If you do that more and more, if you become more non-reactive to the initial burst, then your life changes. And again, that's why I do suggest a lot of people do the 7-day mental diet, because it's a very interesting experiment for a week to just see how that plays out. I had a very similar experience, Marvin, this past weekend. I was telling you, I was traveling, had all these travel delays. And when I was on this plane and we were stuck on the tarmac going nowhere for hours, I was very non-reactive. And I knew I was pissed, but I did not let my anger show in how I reacted until I got off that plane and the flight was canceled. And it wasn't until I was waiting for luggage and waiting way too long that I let any of my anger really show, because I knew if I reacted angrily on the plane, first of all, it's not going to do anything. It's not like, the stewardess is going to help me out and be able to tell me anything. She's just going to get more upset if I get upset, right? Well, if I'm kind, it's going to make it easier for her to treat me kindly. It's also going to more, quite frankly, my real focus is, I was with one of my kids, making sure everything's okay. So by waiting to react until later more angrily, I was able to process it in a much more effective way. And we can all do that. That's like Marvin, at the gym the other day, right? Similarly, I was on a plane again 2 days later, and I was walking onto the plane, and another stewardess was very rude to me. I was going to let her get by. She goes, "I'm not sneaking by you and risking getting hurt." It's an incredibly offensive thing to say to somebody. I mean, you're a stewardess. And, I felt that flare right then. I was like, it had been a long weekend, because I had been delayed. But I let it simmer. I didn't say anything. Later on, I spoke to the stewardess, and she was not about that situation. She was handing me a drink, and she said, "Oh, sorry, it's been a long day," about something totally different. I said, "Oh, that explains it. Like, you had a really long day." Doesn't mean her reaction was appropriate to me. It was inappropriate, but I'm glad I didn't say anything to her, because I think I had a much more peaceful flight by not doing that. So that's just an example of how real non-reactivity works in our life. This goes so much for relationships, not just romantic relationships, but all interpersonal relationships. You work on this, you get better at this, you become a more effective communicator than the vast majority of people. And that makes you a lot more attractive to the vast majority of people. That's, again, the real law of attraction. Sorry. And yeah, I say a bunch of dumb shit, but I'm usually right about this stuff, guys. That's why people come back and apologize to Marvin and me. I'm just more sober about it. Marvin's just more sober about it. We're not pulling the wool over your eyes. We're not selling you a dopamine hit or sugar high. You want to get better? We'll do our best to help you get better. And if we can't help you, we'll try to direct you to someone who might be able to help you. And that's it. That's SP work. Be a good person. Do unto others what you would want done to yourself. Yeah. Any closing remarks, Marv?
Closing remarks, I'd say, is 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to relationships, in my opinion, relationships, what's most important is 90%, 80% managing the relationship. All of the stuff you guys are doing is surface level. Managing is what the hardest part is, whether you have a person or don't have a person, because when you don't have a person, you have to manage all of the feelings that are coming up, to manage yourself doing the technique, which is why it's always good to have your hand held by somebody that knows what you're talking about. You have to manage all of that while you're single, or whatever the case might be. And then once you get into a relationship, you have to learn how to manage the relationship, because contrary to what people will tell you, most of you, to me, the facts are, most of you, when you get in a relationship, you're probably going to stop doing a lot of this work. I see it happen all the time. Most people, they get in relationships and they stop doing the work. It's like they don't care, and then they wonder why stuff falls apart. So you got to manage it, and don't be surprised if you get with somebody and you go through periods of toughness. You know, you go through, people think, oh, I'm gonna get this relationship, I'm gonna get my SP back, and it's gonna be all, you know, the perfect relationship. We're never gonna get any arguments, never gonna get any fights. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Like
Total bullshit.
just because you get your person back does not mean you might stay with that person or talk to that person, but you might have a period of months. You might have a period of 6 months of tough volatility or whatever the case might be, you know, or even longer. I mean, Michelle Obama talked about there was 10 years where she hated Barack. You know what I mean? Like, think about that. She's been married to him for 30. She said there's 10 years where she hated him. And she was like, but I would still, you know, hold on to that 30 plus. And even though we had 10, might have had 10 bad years. So it's like, this is the real shit. I just want all of y'all to wake up, like literally wake up. This is the real shit that Tim and I are talking to you about, that most people aren't going to present to you in a way. But again, Tim and I, when we get on the calls, we are much more gentle. I just want to add that.
That's the irony. It is, we don't sell you fantasy, we sell you reality, because the reality is much better. Honestly, the reality is like, you're a good person and you want to be with a good person. You deserve to be with a good person, you know, and like that's the magic. The magic is very normal, down to earth, you know, like when you're holding a loved one, like it's very down to earth. It's not like, oh, we're now fucking ascending. I mean, come on. I mean, that's cool. If that's you, cool. But we probably can't help you if you want to ascend. We can help you have a loving relationship and just be a good person. All right. Until next time, Marv, thank you for sharing your time. And let's all stay non-reactive. Ciao.